A lot of propaganda and misinformation propagates online during an election year. I think it's important to understand what's true, hyperbole, misinformation, propaganda, and just flat out lies. In this election, the sentient orange anal bead has proclaimed that he is going to be a dictator on day one.
We love this guy. He says, "You're not going to be a dictator, are you?" I said, "No, no, no, other than day one. Trump is a dictator. He wants to be a dictator." You know, it's interesting. I did a show, Sean Hannity. Did you ever hear of him? He's a very nice man. And he said, essentially, "You're not going to be a dictator, are you? Tell me." I think he was trying to give me a nicer question that maybe you guys would. He meant it very well. I said, "I'm going to be a dictator for one day."
And recently, the Supreme Court has ruled that the president has absolute immunity for certain actions. So at this point, how Donald Trump is going to use this absolute immunity is an unknown. It's very possible that he could wield this power in order to become the first American monarch. Today, we are going to hear from Shits on Hammers 1488 or something like that, who claims that liberals have been misunderstanding what Trump is saying and is therefore spreading propaganda or misinformation about his claims that Christians will not have to vote in the next election. So if you want to fuck around and find out what Trump actually means by this statement, then please stay tuned. What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? I'm the Godless Engineer, and I critically analyze apologists' claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Alright, let's hurry up and get on into Shits on Bricks 1933's video.
Another wall of propaganda take. Trump's voting Christian comments. They are being taken completely out of context. So even some commentators have been lured in, rope-a-doped into talking about this and saying, "Oh, Trump is off on this one." Donald Trump's comments about Christians not needing to vote in another 4 years were clearly couched in the context, if you actually watch the full speech, of him saying, "Look, I'm going to solve all these problems, calm down." Now, is that accurate?
Oh, is that what he meant? Let's check the clip.
And by the way, Christians have to vote. You know, I don't want to scold you, but you know that Christians do not vote proportionately. They don't vote like they should. They're not big voters. You know who else aren't voters? The NRA endorsed me very powerfully. Strongest endorsement they can give. National Rifle Association. People that own guns and rifles are not big voters. They have to vote. If you don't vote, we're not going to win the election. If you do vote, we're going to win in a landslide. Too big to rig. We're going to win in a landslide. And again, Christians, get out and vote. Just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
Well, Trump is a bit vague in what he means in those clips. The rhetoric Trump employs builds this view of liberals as anti-American, communist, fascist radicals that shouldn't be given control at all. So what on earth could Trump mean when he proclaims that Christians are not going to have to worry about voting in the next election because he's gonna fix it? Well, the context that he was speaking in was election security and the fact that he wants to make it so that nobody can steal an election in the future. In this respect, with how Trump has spoken about liberals, wouldn't liberals always be a threat? So one has to ask, what would make liberals no longer a threat? It seems to me like the only way to accomplish this is to either eliminate liberals altogether or eliminate voting. Unless it's either of those solutions, then every election is going to have the same problems. And according to Trump, every election is a fight for America. I will say that it would be very helpful if Trump could clarify what he's talking about instead of giving us these vacuous rhetorical statements that we then have to interpret what in the fuck he's even trying to say. Either way, though, Trump definitely seems like he's hell-bent on implementing this fascistic plan to eliminate the need for voting. And before we move on to the rest of Shits' Pants' video, Trump lied about the voter turnout as far as Christians and gun owners go. Studies have shown that a good majority of voters that turn out to vote are Christians. So there's no like low turnout numbers for Christians or this idea that Christians don't vote in elections. Effectively, Trump is lying to his audience in order to get them to do the very thing that they're already going to do. What's the point in lying about this? He doesn't gain anything. It just seems pointless to lie.
No. Not completely, partially accurate. He's being hyperbolic. He's doing the politician thing. He's a fucking politician. Give him some fucking slack. Happens all the time. Find me a politician, I'll find you someone who said something that's slightly misleading. Trump cannot solve all of the problems that have been created by the Biden administration in just 4 years. You're going to need successive administrations to tamp down on the bullshit.
Well, no. Trump lied in those sections, not only about voter turnout, but also about liberals and our goals. So he wasn't being hyperbolic here. He's lying to you, dipshit. Also, I'm curious if Shits on Sticks 1861 here can actually tell us what problems that Biden has created, either for election integrity or otherwise. Now, Shits on Sticks could claim that the Biden administration has been bad about immigration and the border, but that doesn't really track with reality. In reality, liberals in Congress worked with Republicans in order to craft a bipartisan immigration and border bill that they could all agree with. Trump squashed that effort, though, when he told his Cheeto-snorting friends in Congress to vote against their own bill. More importantly, there are a lot of things that we can say about what the Biden administration has done for immigration and the border. Let's just go over a few things. So, first off, reversing Trump-era policies. The Biden administration ended the Remain in Mexico policy. This was officially known as the Migrant Protection Protocols, the MPP. This policy required asylum seekers to wait in Mexico while their claims were being processed in the U.S. Biden administration ended this policy. Second, reversing the public charge rule. The administration revoked the Trump-era public charge rule that made it more difficult for immigrants to obtain green cards if they use public benefits. And then finally, reversing family separation. The Biden administration took steps to reunite families separated at the border under Trump's zero tolerance policy. A task force was created to facilitate these reunifications. Then the Biden administration had new policies and measures. One was DACA strengthening. Biden signed an executive order to protect and strengthen the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals DACA program, which shields eligible young immigrants from deportation and allows them to work legally in the U.S. TPS designations. The administration expanded temporary protected status, TPS, for citizens of certain countries experiencing ongoing armed conflict, environmental disasters, or other extraordinary conditions. Third, asylum and refugee programs. Biden increased the refugee admissions cap, reversing Trump's severe cuts, and worked to rebuild the refugee settlement infrastructure. Next is border management. Biden provided humanitarian resources. The administration increased humanitarian resources at the border, including funding for shelters, medical care, and legal assistance for migrants. Second, addressing the root causes. So Vice President Kamala Harris led efforts to address the root causes of migration from Central America by investing in economic development, combating corruption, and enhancing security in the region. Third, enhanced processing facilities. The Biden administration improved processing facilities and procedures to manage the flow of migrants at the border more humanely and efficiently. Next, there was the comprehensive immigration reform proposal. The Biden administration proposed a comprehensive immigration reform that includes a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, modernization of the immigration system, reduction of visa backlogs, and enhanced border security measures. The key provisions included an 8-year pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, immediate green card eligibility for DACA recipients, TPS holders, and certain farm workers, improved family-based immigration processes, and increased use of technology for border security. That was the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021. Sadly enough, though, this died in Congress. But the fact is that the Biden administration did present this as a proposal. Next is cooperation and diplomacy. The Biden administration worked with Mexico and Central American countries to manage migration flows and enhance border security through cooperation and diplomatic efforts. Next, international aid was increased to Central American countries to address poverty, violence, and corruption, which are key drivers of migration. And then finally, there's enforcement and security. So the Biden administration invested in technology and infrastructure improvements to enhance border security without relying solely on physical barriers. And finally, targeted enforcement. focus my immigration enforcement on individuals who pose national security or public safety threats rather than broad-based raids and deportations. So the Biden administration has done a number of things in order to help alleviate some of the ills at the border and with our immigration system. So any of the problems that surfaced during the Biden administration would have only surfaced because of the direct or indirect influence of the sentient anal bead. However, I do feel like in this section there's a subtle admission to what Trump claims to be doing here. Shits in his hand 1921 claims that multiple consecutive conservative administrations is going to be required in order to fix what he thinks are the problems in the United States. Which, I mean, we still don't even know what that fucking means. And Trump said that they are going to fix things so that people don't have to worry about voting anymore. I mean, I feel like this is pretty simple math. 1 + 1 equals a fascistic authoritarian government. If Trump is going to fix shit, then he is going to have to rig the future election so that only conservatives win the vote. Or just do away with voting altogether.
With that being said, he's willing to tackle the problems starting day one. I think he's equipped for the task. I think that there's a favorable Senate map, and the Senate Republicans worked with him better than the House Republicans. They're just a hot mess.
This section kind of illuminates how shits his pants 1921 doesn't understand how the government works. Congress should be making bipartisan laws because the United States is not primarily composed of one particular political ideology. A bipartisan effort in Congress would ideally achieve a compromise where both sides get a little bit of what they want. Shits his pants thinks that one party should be in total control of the government, and it's not the liberals. Combined with his previous statements, it's not hyperbole or misinformation or propaganda to say that Shits his pants would love for a conservative dynasty to be established to control America for the next 10 to 20 years. Shitty fashion since 1865 is definitely a fascist.
This is propaganda. Trump was not saying that Christians shouldn't vote. And he did not say, "I'm not a Christian," when he was addressing them. Some people are mishearing what he said. He clearly said, "I am a Christian." And he is. He's a liberal Christian. He's not an evangelical. He probably believes genuinely in Jesus as his personal savior. But he doesn't go to church on a regular basis. By the way, again, echoes of Ronald Reagan.
Oh, did he not? Let's check the tape.
And again, Christians, get out and vote. Just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again.
In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again.
We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
Well, he said that this would be the last election that Christians would have to worry about voting in. So again, the only way for Christians to not have to vote in this particular context would be if Trump fixed the system so that only conservative Christians were voted into office. Or again, just effectively getting rid of voting in general. Fascist regimes like the Russian Federation have sham elections all the time where they only have one person running for the presidency. And so effectively, there really isn't an election. It doesn't matter how many people vote or which people vote or who they vote for. And that's one possible solution that Trump could enact, you know, given his absolute immunity for official actions. And if you're in the crowd right now and saying that can't happen, I would love for you to point out the law or any kind of situation that would prevent Trump from effectively being a Putin-like dictator. I mean, the man already idolizes all of these dictators out there, is taking notes about how they run their countries and what they do in order to stay in power. What do you think we could do, like, as a society to stop him from doing that? So, saying that Trump wants to fix the United States into a fascistic, totalitarian, and authoritarian state is not hyperbole or propaganda, unless he's just flat out lying to his supporters, which, you know, is probably not a good idea considering that he's radicalized his entire audience to the point where they even tried to assassinate him. Oh, and Trump's similarities to Reagan are really scary. Trump is pushing a lot of the same ideas that Reagan did, but that's probably because both were and are being influenced by the Heritage Foundation. In case you didn't know, the Heritage Foundation started influencing U.S. policy starting with the Reagan administration and was implemented all throughout every single conservative administration to this day. The Project 2017, or the mandate for leadership in 2017 that Trump's administration implemented, they ended up implementing about 60% of the proposal. So just think about what's going to occur now if Trump were to get in power and the mandate for policy becomes his playbook.
You know, when he held up the Bible outside of the church there, people said, oh, he's going to go full Christian nationalist or something. I assured people then, and I assure them now, as a non-Christian myself, I do not necessarily, I don't follow the Christian religion. I'm apatheistic. I'm literally anti-religious. I assure you that Trump is an innocuous liberal Christian. He is not on board with the evangelocon sentiment. That's not him. He's a corporate boardroom urbanite. He's effectively an 80s Democrat more than anything else.
It seems like Shags' Couch 3434 doesn't understand what Christian nationalism is. Christian nationalism isn't about being super Christian, like in a theological sense. Christian nationalism is about using the Christian religion in order to push a fascistic rule over a population. Technically, that doesn't even require you to be a Christian in order to be a Christian nationalist. So Trump can be and is a Christian nationalist who is looking to use the Christian religion in order to push his political ideology onto the American people, regardless of what Christianity teaches. Ironically, that makes this message that Fuck My Chest Hair 1488 is preaching on his channel to his audience propaganda, and it's aimed at disarming his audience into thinking that Trump is not an existential threat to democracy, when in reality, he definitely is.
He's like a Reagan or a Mondale, you know, back when the ideology was basically fused. He's not going to put women barefooting in the kitchen. He's not going to pass a national abortion ban. When queried on this, by the way, it might be a big problem with some right-wing voters. He's been deflecting on this. That's because he wouldn't sign it. But the liberals, because he's been non-committal, say, well, he's going to sign a national abortion ban or something like that. No, he's not. No, he's clearly made it plain that it's a states' rights issue.
So it's true that Trump has said that he believes that abortion is a states' rights issue. His Agenda 47 says that they are very much against later-term abortions while still affirming that states have the right to pass pro-life laws. This, though, is in stark contrast to what everybody that Trump has surrounded himself with, including J.D. Vance, has said. J.D. Vance of the National Couchfuckers Association claims that abortion should be nationally banned.
Do you think it will be resolved nationally? That's Adrian's. He was very serious about it. He was like, it's going to be resolved nationally. And I was like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would like abortion to be illegal nationally.
The authors of Project 2025 feel the exact same way. And keep in mind that Trump has promised a number of positions to key architects of Project 2025. I hypothesize that Trump is lying to his audience about this so that he can get voted into office. And it totally helps his campaign for him to sit there and be like, oh, the Project 2025 is totally radical. It makes it seem as though he's coming across as more reasonable than he actually is. This is because he understands that a majority of people, including Republicans, agree that abortion is healthcare. Now, if Trump were primarily campaigning in states that have already banned abortion and he needed those states in order to win, then I'm sure that he would not mind going on stage and call for a national ban on abortion. But that is not the case for the rest of America. And my hypothesis does have some evidence behind it because we have seen evidence of Republicans flipping on issues like abortion. Actually, specifically on abortion. If you remember the Supreme Court justices that Trump stuffed the court with, they all affirmed that Roe v. Wade was the law of the land, but as soon as they got into court and they got a case that challenged Roe v. Wade, they flipped it. They flipped it like the fucking little shits they are. So it's really not all that much of a stretch to say that Trump is lying to everybody about not wanting a national abortion ban. So it's not really all that much of a stretch to say that Trump is lying to his audience and the rest of America when he says that he's not going to institute a national abortion ban. If he's elected, it's something that will most likely occur.
Donald Trump did not tell Christians not to show up to the polls in 2028. What he was saying quite clearly, and the terminology that he used gave his enemies ammo. This is sort of like J.D. Vance with the childless cat lady thing. It could have been worded differently. And so, you know, the people that are sort of writing his lines for the teleprompter, you need to do a little bit better. And Trump shouldn't go off the rails. And he spoke wrongly. The way in which he spoke in this particular instance gave his enemies ammo. But what clearly was meant was that Christians didn't need to worry too much and that he would get right to work and solve a bunch of problems starting day one. That he would be an effective leader.
So Trump emphasized the need for Christians to vote in this election, but he reassured them that they will not have to worry about voting in the next election. And all of this is because he's going to fix America so that they don't have to worry about it. This position doesn't make sense unless he's saying that he is going to fix America so that the conservatives stay in power and that they won't have to vote at all, either by eliminating voting or that they will fix things so that conservatives definitely stay in power regardless of how the vote actually goes. Either way though, right here, he's saying the quiet part out loud, and you should fucking listen to it. For the longest time, conservatives have only ever wanted their particular supporters to be able to vote. I hearken back to Paul Weyrach's statements about voting.
Now, many of our Christians have what I call the goo-goo syndrome. Good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
This idea that Republicans only want their Republican audience to be voting is why they harp on voter ID laws so much. They want to institute these laws because they unfairly target the poorer population in America. Typically, the poorer population is going to vote more Democratic. Additionally, conservatives have made a concerted effort to make sure that minority groups primarily make up the poorer class. So this is both targeting the poorer class and minority groups. Voter ID laws are more about voter suppression rather than election integrity. Our elections are already safe and protected, so there's literally no need for these laws that they're proposing. If they really wanted to protect our elections, they would pass campaign finance laws, or at least as far as voter ID laws go, you would need to pass a law that requires a voter ID, but also provides voter IDs to the entire population, regardless of your financial status. Meaning that the government would foot the bill for the IDs, and they would also maybe compensate or make it so that jobs would have to allow you to at least go and get your ID, or maybe make it simple for you to retrieve your ID. But they won't do either of these things though. They won't pass common sense voter ID laws or campaign finance law because they don't want to pass these kinds of laws. These kinds of laws would ensure equal representation as well as an equal right to vote, and they don't want that.
Number one, he totally cares so little about the nation that he doesn't want Christians to vote after he's out of office in his second term. Or the other claim, well, he's basically admitting to them that he's going to become a dictator. No, he's not. There's no methodology by which he could do so. It's not even physically possible. The American people would never stand for such a thing. It would never happen. Trump voters would abandon him if he were to try to stay in office after his second term. He's not legally allowed to run again. It's just the way that our system works. You know, there are problems with the system. That's one thing that's actually agreed upon generally by the public. Presidents get 2 terms. Ta-da! Now you can't run again. You have to, it's so sad for him. When he gets done with his second term, he has to go back to his 200-bedroom home. He's going to be miserable. He's perfectly fine. He'll still be meeting with foreign dignitaries and stuff.
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, it would be a shame if we had Trump on video claiming that he would be a dictator on day one.
We love this guy. He says, "You're not going to be a dictator, are you?" I said, no, other than day one.
Well, the Project 2025 authors have executive orders ready for Trump to sign on day one. And if he fulfills his promise of being a dictator on day one, combined with his absolute immunity for official actions, then there is nothing that Project 2025 could draft up as an executive order that would be illegal. Day one, dictator Trump could radically change how the government operates and a lot of the laws that we have now that protect how our government operates. He could change how our Constitution is edited and amended, and therefore he himself could revoke the 22nd Amendment, which establishes term limits for presidents and vice presidents. Shit some bricks, 1861 did say that Trump has a possible favorable House and Senate map. So they too could easily change the term limits for the president. So Trump has both a legal and illegal path in order to stay in office past his second term. His assertion that this couldn't happen because of how things operate now just really doesn't make sense when one, Trump could definitely change how things work so that he can stay in office. But two, as we saw with Roe v. Wade, the impossible is not impossible, because this sounds a whole lot like the rhetoric that I was hearing around the abortion issue in 2016. Everybody was sounding the alarm bells that Roe v. Wade was going to be going away, abortion was going to get outlawed. Now, true, abortion didn't get outlawed, the protections were revoked and therefore sent back to the states, which then individual states outlawed abortion. So, I mean, not exactly a one-to-one comparison there, but I mean, effectively, you have a bunch of states that have outlawed abortion now, and that's directly because of Trump and his actions to pack the Supreme Court, which is something that Trump himself has complained about liberals wanting to do. Weird. But in any case, if Trump is elected, he can change the rules of how things operate, and he can stay in power. So everything that Shits My Dicks just said, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense considering all of the contextual information. Now, as far as his baseless assertion that Trump supporters wouldn't allow him to continue to be president, I beg to differ.
Trump has been talking right now about, he says he thinks he should be immune from the actions he takes while president. You think he should have total immunity?
Otherwise, everyone's going to jail.
You're fine with Trump as king?
Yes.
Trump as king is good?
Yep.
And that's about as American as you can get.
Yes, it is.
King Trump.
Yes.
Shits on Dick 6969 is also claiming that it would take multiple conservative government administrations in order to fix things. So he seems to be only solidifying this idea that he is a fascistic totalitarian.
You know, if the Democrats win after that, probably the world will lose respect for the United States again.
The developed world laughed at Trump because he was childish and petty. He only got respect from dictators.
They'd rather talk to Donald Trump.
No. Dictators like talking to Trump. Dictators. Get it right, Shits My Grits 6942.
This is complete propaganda. They're deliberately misconstruing what he said and what he meant to try to attack him.
No, this is not propaganda. What Shits My Dicks is saying is propaganda, but what the liberals are claiming about Trump is not propaganda. Taking what Trump has said in the full context of everything surrounding it should make people worried about the future of America. Trump and conservatives are literally an existential threat to democracy.
Kamala's only got a few months to campaign. By the way, they did that on purpose to try to shield her from too much criticism so that people would know less about her. Because then she's more like generic Dem versus known Republican former president, because Kamala hasn't done anything. That's, by the way, a big talking point that needs to be used, actually, in the war against the authoritarianism that would be the Kamala regime. What did she actually do as vice president, other than be border czar, and she was? Well, the answer is absolutely nothing. There is not one iota of awareness in her fucking head. And she didn't do anything because anything that she does tends to turn to a pile of shit.
Now, this is literally propaganda, or maybe it's just misinformation that Shits His Sticks has bought into. First, let's look at the responsibilities of the vice presidential position and then compare that to Kamala Harris's track record. So the responsibilities of the vice president are, first off, we have constitutional duties. So one, the vice president is the president of the Senate. The vice president serves as the president of the Senate with the power to cast tie-breaking votes. This role ensures that the Senate can reach decisions when votes are evenly split. Next, as far as constitutional duties go, it's the succession of the presidency. So the vice president is first in line in the succession to the presidency. If the president dies, resigns, or is incapacitated, the vice president assumes the office of the president. And then finally, there's certifying electoral votes, which I know conservatives really fucking hate that particular position, but the vice president presides over a joint session of Congress that certifies the electoral college votes following a presidential election. And then next, there are ceremonial duties for the vice president. So there's representing the vice president. The vice president often represents the president at official functions, both domestically and internationally. This includes attending state funerals, diplomatic events, and other ceremonies. Advising the president. As a key advisor, the vice president provides counsel to the president on various issues and participates in cabinet meetings and policy discussions. And then there are some additional roles and responsibilities. One, policy advocacy and initiatives. The vice president often takes on specific policy portfolios or leads initiatives at the president's request. For example, Vice President Kamala Harris has focused on issues like immigration, voting rights, and reproductive rights during her tenure. Then there's global diplomacy. The vice president may engage in diplomatic missions, strengthening international alliances and representing U.S. interests abroad. This includes meeting with foreign leaders and attending international summits. And then finally, public engagement. The vice president frequently participates in public events and engages with communities to promote the administration's policies and gather public input. This role helps build public support for the president's agenda. So let's measure. So let's see how Kamala Harris measures up to the set of roles and responsibilities of the vice president. First, she launched the Fight for Reproductive Freedoms tour to advocate for more abortion access and become the first vice president to visit a clinic providing abortion services. Her Central America Forward initiative has secured over $4.2 billion in private sector commitments to create local jobs and improving living conditions, aiming to reduce mass migration. She has been at the forefront of the administration's efforts to protect voting rights, pushing the passage of the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act, and engaging with lawmakers and civil rights leaders to build coalitions and apply pressure for legislative action. Kamala Harris has also championed criminal justice reform and has been instrumental in implementing policies that limit the use of deadly force, ban chokeholds, and improve data sharing on use of force incidents by law enforcement agencies. She has played a significant role in the passage of the American Rescue Plan, a $2 trillion COVID-19 relief bill. Additionally, she has been a strong advocate for mental health, advocating for the expanded postpartum care through Medicaid and other initiatives to improve maternal mental health outcomes. Kamala Harris has set a record for the most tie-breaking votes cast by a vice president in the U.S. history, including critical votes for the Inflation Reduction Act and other significant legislation. She has supported the largest investment in infrastructure in the United States history, focusing on removing lead pipes, improving public transit, and advancing high-speed internet access. Additionally, she has been involved in passing legislation for significant investments to tackle the climate crisis. And finally, she has cast a number of tie-breaking votes in the Senate that directly benefited the American people, including the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, budget resolutions and amendments, the Kieran Ahua nomination, the Colin Kahl nomination, and the Inflation Reduction Act. She had 33 total tie-breaking votes in the Senate. So it seems to me like Shits His Pants 1488 is just completely wrong about Kamala Harris's track record as vice president. Seems like she's done a number of important things with her vice presidency, and I feel like Vice President Kamala Harris will be an excellent president and definitely will have the American people at the forefront of her mind, instead of Project 2025 or whoever in the fuck Trump is sucking this week. So that's going to be it for Fuck His Chest Hair 1492. If you will, please go down below into the comments. Let me know what you thought about his video. Do you think he made some solid points, or do you think that maybe he's a bit of a fascistic totalitarian that's presenting propaganda to his audience, or at least misinformation that he is also bought into and is therefore miseducating his audience? Let me know down below with what you think about that. And while you're down there, why don't you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.